The scent of old oil and cold metal clung to Evan's clothes, a familiar ghost from his day at the garage. In the quiet of his small apartment, the only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator and the soft, rhythmic breathing of his daughter, Rosie, asleep in the next room. He was just about to wash the grease from under his fingernails when his phone vibrated against the worn laminate countertop, a harsh buzz in the stillness. An unknown number. He almost ignored it, weary to his bones, but some instinct made him answer. Hello. A choked, frantic voice he hadn't heard in 6 years shot through the speaker, a relic from a buried life. Evan. It's Sarah, his heart seized. Sarah. His ex-wife. The woman who had taken their son, Noah, and vanished behind the gilded walls of a new marriage, leaving him with nothing but a court order and a hollow ache. What is it? He asked, his voice flat, a shield against the sudden flood of old pain. It's Noah, she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a torrent of panic. He's at Northwood General. His heart, oh, God, Evan, his heart failed. The doctors, they said you're our only shot. The world tilted. Noah. His son. A boy he knew only from a handful of faded photographs tucked into the back of a drawer. A 6-year-old stranger with his own eyes. The words didn't make sense. Only shot. What are you talking about? He heard a man's sharp, impatient voice in the background, and then Sarah spoke again, her tone desperate, pleading. Please, just come. Please. They'll explain everything. We need you. The line went dead. Evan stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the silence. He looked toward Rosie's door, a fierce, protective love surging through him. He had built a life here, a small, safe world for the two of them. Now the past was clawing its way back in, threatening to tear it all down. But it was Noah. His son. He had no choice. The polished marble floors and hushed, antiseptic air of Northwood General felt like another planet. Evan, in his worn work jeans and faded jacket, felt every stare, every subtle judgment from the well-dressed patrons of this temple of expensive medicine. He found Sarah in a private waiting lounge, a place of plush chairs and curated art. She looked older, thinner, her face a mask of sleepless terror. Beside her stood her husband, Richard Hemlock, a man whose tailored suit probably cost more than Evan's rent for the year. Richard's eyes swept over him, a quick, dismissive appraisal that catalogued the grease under his nails and the scuff on his boots. There was no greeting, only cold calculation. Thank you for coming, Richard said, his tone suggesting a business transaction. A woman in crisp blue scrubs approached them then, her expression a careful blend of compassion and exhaustion. Mr. Davies. I'm Dr. Wells, Clara Wells. Her name tag identified her as the chief of cardiothoracic surgery. She had a commanding presence, but her eyes held a deep weariness that Evan recognized. Your son, Noah, has a rare congenital cardiomyopathy, she began, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the emotional fog. His heart muscle is deteriorating rapidly. A transplant is his only option, but we don't have time to wait for a donor on the list. There's a new experimental procedure, a living donor myocardial graft. It requires a direct biological match with a unique genetic marker. We've tested his mother and her entire family. None are compatible. She paused, her gaze meeting Evan's. You are our last hope. The weight of her words settled on him, immense and terrifying. He was the final lottery ticket for a life he'd been forced to leave behind. He looked past her, through the glass, and saw a small, pale face in a hospital bed. His son. And he knew, in that instant, he would do anything. Before the compatibility tests could even be drawn, Richard cornered him near the nurse's station, a leather-bound folder in his hand. We need to discuss the terms of your assistance, he said, his voice low and conspiratorial. He opened the folder on a nearby counter, revealing a document thick with legal jargon. This is a standard agreement. It ensures discretion for all parties. It's an NDA, coupled with a full relinquishment of any and all future parental claims. In exchange for your donation, Hemlock Industries will deposit a sum of $500,000 into an account of your choosing. Evan stared at the paper, then at Richard's smug, expectant face. The raw commercialism of the offer, the sheer audacity of trying to buy a piece of him to save his son and then discard the rest, made something snap deep inside him. He felt a cold, quiet rage solidify in his chest. No, Evan said, his voice barely a whisper but carrying the weight of a shout. Richard blinked. I'm sorry. I said no. I'm not signing anything. Evan pushed the folder back across the counter. My son is not a business deal. His life isn't for sale, and neither is my fatherhood. Richard's face darkened, the polite veneer cracking to reveal the ugly entitlement beneath. Don't be a fool. This is a life-changing amount of money for someone in your position. It's what's best for Noah. He doesn't know you. Your sudden appearance would only confuse and traumatize him. Take the money, save his life, and let him have the stable future I can provide. My son needs his father, not a payoff, Evan countered, his voice gaining strength. From down the hall, Dr. Wells watched the exchange, her arms crossed. She had seen countless family dramas play out in these sterile corridors, many of them fueled by greed and desperation. She had assumed Evan would be no different. But the quiet, unshakable dignity with which he refused the money, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, it was not what she expected. He wasn't weak or greedy. He was a father. Hours bled into one another in the sterile waiting room. Evan sat alone, the silence punctuated by the distant beeps of machines and the soft squeak of nurses' shoes. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a drawing from Rosie, a crayon portrait of the two of them as superheroes, their capes a wild scribble of purple and orange. It was his anchor in this storm. That's a very powerful-looking superhero, Dr. Wells' voice startled him. She was standing beside his chair, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. She offered one to him. Thought you could use this. Evan took it, his calloused fingers wrapping around the warmth. Thanks. My daughter, Rosie. She thinks I fix cars with super strength. A small, sad smile touched Clara's lips. She's lucky to have you. They sat in a companionable silence for a moment before she spoke again, her voice softer now, stripped of its clinical authority. I had a younger brother. David. He was born with a hole in his heart. The surgeries, they weren't as advanced back then. She stared at her hands, as if seeing the past in their lines. I was 12 when he died. I spent my entire life since then trying to learn how to fix broken hearts. The confession hung in the air between them, a fragile bridge of shared grief. Evan looked at this formidable, brilliant woman and saw the wounded child she still carried inside. I'm sorry, he said, the words simple but sincere. He would be proud of you. She gave him a grateful, watery smile. In his quiet resilience, his unwavering focus on his children, she saw a strength that dwarfed Richard Hemlock's blustering power. She saw a good man, trapped in an impossible situation, holding fast to what truly mattered. The respect she felt was immediate and profound, a quiet shift in the sterile hospital air. Her professional guard was beginning to lower, replaced by a burgeoning, unexpected admiration. The call came just after dawn. A nurse found Evan asleep in the uncomfortable waiting room chair. Mr. Davies. The lab results are in. You're a perfect match. A wave of dizzying relief washed over him, so potent it almost brought him to his knees. Noah had a chance. But the relief was swiftly crushed by Richard, who appeared as if summoned by the news. His face was a thundercloud. This changes nothing, he hissed, blocking Evan's path toward the elevators. You are not to see the boy. I've already spoken with hospital administration. We can't risk agitating him before the procedure. It's medically inadvisable. He gestured to 2 broad-shouldered security guards who had materialized behind him. They will escort you to the pre-op wing when it's time, and you will leave immediately after. The threat was clear. Evan was a tool to be used and then discarded. The thought of undergoing surgery, of giving a piece of himself to his son, without even being allowed to see him, to speak to him, was a unique form of cruelty. Just as Evan was about to argue, to fight, Dr. Wells strode down the hallway, her expression resolute. That won't be necessary, Mr. Hemlock, she said, her voice ringing with authority. She stood between Evan and the guards. As the lead surgeon on this case, I determine what is medically advisable. The psychological state of both the donor and the recipient is paramount to recovery. A calm, reassured patient heals faster. Denying a father the right to comfort his son is not only cruel, it's counterproductive to my team's efforts. She turned her sharp gaze on Richard. Mr. Davies will see his son. I insist on it. Richard looked stunned, his power checkmated by a force he couldn't buy or bully. He sputtered, but Clara held her ground, an unwavering ally at Evan's side. For the first time in 6 years, someone was fighting for him, for his right to be a father. The pediatric ICU was a quiet, somber place, filled with the soft whirring and beeping of life-sustaining technology. Noah was smaller than Evan had imagined, a fragile bird nested in a tangle of wires and tubes. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. His eyes fluttered open as Evan approached the bed, brown and wide with a child's unfiltered curiosity. "Hello," Evan whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. Sarah had told Noah that a special friend was coming, a hero who was going to help make his heart strong again. He didn't want to overwhelm the boy with a truth too heavy for his frail body to bear. "I'm Evan," he gently took Noah's small hand, his own rough, calloused palm dwarfing it. "I heard you were in need of a superhero sidekick." A tiny smile ghosted across Noah's lips. Evan pulled Rosie's drawing from his pocket and smoothed it out on the bedside table. "My daughter, Rosie, drew this. She said the hero in the orange cape is extra strong. That's me. I'm here to give you some of my power, okay?" Noah nodded weakly, his eyes fixed on the vibrant crayon figures. Evan sat there for what felt like an eternity, just holding his son's hand, murmuring stories about fixing stubborn engines and Rosie's latest playground adventures. He poured 6 years of lost time, of silent love and longing, into that one gentle touch. Richard watched from the doorway, his arms crossed, his face a mask of possessive fury. He saw not a father comforting his son, but an intruder staking a claim on his territory. The air crackled with the unspoken conflict, a silent war waged between quiet, unconditional love and the cold, brittle pride of a man who believed he could own everything, even a child's heart. Evan didn't look at him once. His entire world had shrunk to the small, warm hand resting in his. The morning of the surgery arrived with a cold, gray dawn. The hospital was a hive of controlled, purposeful activity. Evan changed into the sterile scrubs, his own heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Before leaving his apartment, he had written a letter to Rosie and left it with his neighbor, Mrs. Gable. It was a letter full of love and pride, a litany of all the things he cherished about her, a desperate attempt to put his whole heart onto a piece of paper, just in case his own failed. As they wheeled him toward the operating theater, he passed Sarah in the hallway. Her face was ashen. "Evan," she whispered, grabbing his arm. The arrogance was gone, replaced by raw, primal fear. "I'm so sorry. For everything. I was weak. Richard, he made it seem so easy, so much better for Noah. I never should have listened. I never should have cut you out." It wasn't an apology that could erase 6 years of pain, but it was a crack in the dam of lies she had built around her life. "Just save our boy," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Evan simply nodded. In the operating room, everything was bright lights and gleaming steel. He saw Dr. Wells across the room, her eyes, visible over her surgical mask, were focused and calm. She gave him a small, reassuring nod before turning to her team, her voice a confident command that filled the room. Evan took a deep breath as the anesthesiologist spoke to him in a soothing voice. His last conscious thought was of two faces, Rosie, laughing on a swing, and Noah, his small hand clutching a crayon drawing of a superhero. Then, the world faded to black. Evan woke up to a dull, persistent ache in his side and the gentle, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. The first face he saw was Clara's. She was sitting by his bed, her surgeon scrubs replaced with a simple sweater. She looked tired, but she was smiling. "It went perfectly," she said softly, her voice a balm to his foggy mind. "Noah is stable and in recovery. Your graft is already working miracles. You saved him." Evan, relief, pure and overwhelming, washed through him, more powerful than any anesthetic. Over the next few days, as the haze of surgery lifted, Clara became a constant, quiet presence. She'd stop by at the end of her long shifts, bringing him coffee or just sitting with him while he regained his strength. They talked about everything and nothing, cars, medicine, their favorite kinds of music, the dreams they had for their children. He learned about the immense pressure she was under, the lives she held in her hands every day. She learned about the quiet pride he took in his work, the simple, profound joy he found in raising his daughter. One afternoon, an older, distinguished-looking man in a suit visited his room. "Mr. Davies, my name is Arthur Pendleton. I sit on the hospital's board of directors." Evan was confused, worried it was something to do with Richard. "Dr. Wells has told me a great deal about you," Arthur continued, his eyes kind. And I've seen for myself the way you conducted yourself with immense integrity under significant pressure. I'm also the chairman of a philanthropic foundation that funds community outreach. We run a vocational training center for at-risk youth. It's a place where they can learn tangible skills, mechanics, carpentry, electronics. We need a new program manager. Someone with real-world expertise and, more importantly, a strong moral compass. Someone these kids can look up to. He paused, letting his words sink in. The job comes with a good salary, full benefits, and a stable future. Dr. Wells thought you might be the perfect man for it. Evan was speechless. This opportunity, this incredible gift, wasn't a handout. It was a direct result of the choice he had made, of refusing to sell his soul. It was a life raft, offered not by a bully with a checkbook, but by a community that had seen his true worth. Weeks turned into a month. Evan's recovery was steady, his body knitting itself back together. He accepted the job offer from Mr. Pendleton's foundation and felt a sense of purpose he hadn't realized was missing. He traded the grease-stained overalls for a simple polo shirt and the satisfaction of teaching a teenager how to rebuild a carburetor. The best part, however, were his visits with Noah. The legal threats from Richard had evaporated into thin air. His attempt to manipulate the situation had backfired spectacularly within the discreet, powerful social circle of the hospital board. Whispers of his callous behavior had tarnished his pristine image. With her son's life no longer hanging in the balance, Sarah found a new strength, pushing back against her husband's control and insisting on Evan's involvement, supported by a team of hospital-appointed family counselors. Noah was getting stronger every day. The pale, fragile boy was being replaced by a curious, energetic child. He was starting to ask more questions about Evan, the hero friend who shared his smile. Their visits were tentative at first, but soon filled with Lego building sessions and stories. It was the slow, careful construction of a bond that had been stolen from them. His relationship with Clara was also blossoming. The sterile hospital corridors had been replaced by walks in the park and quiet dinners at his apartment. She met Rosie, and the two connected instantly, Rosie chattering away to her new friend about school and superheroes. One sunny Saturday afternoon, they sat at a small table in a neighborhood cafe, the air filled with the scent of roasted coffee and fresh pastries. Clara reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "You're a good man, Evan Davies," she said, her voice soft but sure. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." In her eyes, he didn't see pity or a project, he saw respect, admiration, and the quiet promise of a shared future. The autumn sun cast a golden glow across the park. The crisp air was filled with the laughter of children, a sound that Evan now cherished more than ever. He was pushing Rosie on a swing, her small body flying higher and higher with each push, her delighted shrieks echoing in the cool air. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a picture message from Sarah. It was a photo of Noah, bundled in a jacket, taking his first tentative steps on the grass in their backyard. A wide, triumphant grin was spread across his face. Evan smiled, a deep, genuine smile that reached his eyes, free from the weight of the past 6 years. The ache of what he had lost was finally being overshadowed by the joy of what he was gaining. Clara came to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing against his. She followed his gaze to the phone screen and her own smile widened. She didn't say anything, just slipped her hand into his, their fingers lacing together naturally, comfortably. They stood there together, watching Rosie soar toward the sky. It was a simple, perfect moment. A quiet mechanic, a brilliant surgeon, and a little girl with a purple cape. A new family, not forged in a traditional mold, but pieced together by courage, kindness, and the resilient power of a heart that refused to be broken. The empty chair at his small kitchen table no longer felt like a void, but an invitation. The silence in his apartment was no longer lonely, but peaceful. Looking at Clara's warm profile and hearing his daughter's joyful laughter, Evan felt a profound sense of hope. The storm had passed, and in its wake, against all odds, a new and beautiful life was beginning to grow. He was no longer just surviving, he was finally, truly, starting to live.